thank you, Chairman and Ranking Member, for having this markup today. Now, a lot's been said about the Prove It Act, but I think I want to clarify a few things as to what the Prove It Act does, and importantly, what it does not do. And we can make up all kinds of things that are possible that aren't related to this, but the Prove It doesn't authorize many of those things. I was recently asked if Prove It would lead to EPA implementing a carbon tax. Now, if that was the bill, I'd vote no, obviously, but thankfully it's not the bill. But there's a lot of things wrong with that supposition. First of all, the EPA isn't tasked with this study, and neither this committee or that agency handles tax policy. But it's indicative of the noise that surrounds the actual substance of the legislation. So I want to reiterate what's in the bill. First, contrary to the ranking member's comments about this bill being a, quote, road to a carbon tax, I want to read the actual text. Regarding, by the way, authorities which aren't fuzzy and prohibitions which are clear as can be. Quote, nothing in this act provides any new authority to any federal agency to impose, collect, or enforce a greenhouse gas emissions tax, fee, duty, price, or charge. Right? So nothing empowers any agency to do any of these things. If it were a tax, it would be in Chairman Carper's other committee, the Finance Committee, as I said earlier. I think it goes without saying, but you'd be hard-pressed to find two states more opposed to a carbon tax than West Virginia and North Dakota, believe me. And I've got a long record of opposing a carbon tax. So this insinuation that I'd be pushing a tax on any of our manufacturers and producers is, well, it's laughable. But even if you were trying to correlate Prove It to a carbon tax, I want to read something that supporters of a carbon tax have said about Prove It. They've said, quote, a domestic carbon fee would be applied on fuels when they enter the economy. The Prove It Act is an analysis of average product level emissions intensity data. This data is irrelevant in implementing a U.S. carbon fee, end quote. That's advocates of a carbon fee. I'm starting to talk the people on the other side here out of this, I'm afraid. Similarly, I better be careful. There is support for some sort of carbon tariff to level the playing field for American workers while punishing polluting countries like China and Russia that undercut them. But again, that's not today's bill. And if it were, it'd be in the Finance Committee. But I find it concerning that some keep talking about carbon border adjustment as if it's theoretical. In fact, I think one of the things that the ranking member said is that some people say that this is for, Prove It is to accommodate a European Union's carbon tax. It's not to accommodate it, it's to defend against it. The EU is already collecting data to implement their CBAM in 2026, and the United Kingdom has announced theirs will go into effect 1 year later. So this is not theoretical. This is real. These are our closest allies that are preparing a tariff against products manufactured in the United States. Multiple American products will be charged a tariff based on math that the Europeans use, and they're going to use it on us, not to help us. Prove It is an opportunity to make sure we collect our own data rather than subject ourselves to whatever Europe hits us with. Now, I don't want the steel, aluminum, hydrogen, and fertilizer producers that we represent to be hit by a European tariff without us having the data to rebut it. And the Department of Energy has a good record in this area. For example, this is a very specific and personal example. In 2019, when I got to know the French ambassador really well, the French utility company Engie, which is partially owned by the French government, canceled a contract for U.S. LNG, claiming it was dirty. Imagine that now. They had a large contract for United States liquid natural gas, but canceled it because they claimed it was dirty and instead bought that gas from Russia. From Russia. 40% greater carbon intensity than our gas. And then, of course, Vladimir Putin attacks Ukraine, and Engie got religion and came to the realization we'd rather have the clean stuff from the United States. This is why Senator Coons and I tasked DOE with doing this study. Work done by DOE and others show that the United States has a distinct carbon advantage over our competitors. DOE should compile this data from existing sources, by the way. Nobody is being forced to provide new information. That's prohibited in the bill. So DOE should compile this data to prove our American excellence. Ultimately, this is about giving credit where credit is due, and that is to the American workers who dutifully abide by the highest standards in the world. And we need to make sure their compliance isn't undercut by foreign competitors who have little to no environmental standards, never mind the equally egregious human and worker rights records of some of these players. Finally, Prove It illustrates the high tax American businesses already pay in the form of compliance costs. That's why this bill has such broad support, because American businesses have made great strides at great cost in becoming the cleanest in the world. Their innovation and investment should be accounted for, and we should use this data to make sure their interests are protected. Mr. Chairman, sometimes people question why a senator from North Dakota, an energy state like ours, would support Prove It, and I get it. Some people like cheap stuff from China and are perfectly comfortable pretending there's nothing wrong with a communist regime abusing its citizens and environment to win an economic war with the United States. But if the goal is to lessen global emissions, then the answer has to be to produce and manufacture more here in the United States of America, in the cleanest country. I'll take Bakken and Alaskan North Slope crude any day over the dirtiest product coming out of Venezuela or Russia. The same goes for mining in Wyoming and Arizona, and steel and aluminum production in Arkansas and West Virginia. So let's put the data together to make sure we stand up for the workers and businesses that we represent. I urge a yes vote. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.